Welcome to episode 51 of the Hard Truth About B2B e-commerce. I'm your co-host, Isaiah Bollinger, and I'm here with Tim on our 51st. So we're past the 50 mark now.
I couldn't be more excited. Hi to our listeners. This is Timothy Peterson. We're looking forward to 51 to 100, and we'll see when that 100th episode is. Maybe we should take bets on that. Maybe by April of 2022, May. I'm not sure. We'll have to figure out when we want to do it. Maybe we'll pack more in. But let me give some shout outs to our sponsors as we kick off another episode of the Hard Truth About B2B e-commerce. Our first sponsor is PunchOut2Go. They are a global B2B integration company specializing in connecting commerce business platforms with e-procurement and ERP applications. And PunchOut2Go's iPaaS technology seamlessly links business applications to automate the flow of purchasing data. With their solution, you can immediately reduce integration complexities for PunchOut catalogs, electronic purchase orders, invoices, and other B2B sales order automation documents to accelerate your business results. Thank you to them. I also want to give a big thanks to our other sponsor, a little more recent, Balance. Balance is a B2B e-commerce payment solution that works well for you and your buyers. It offers a seamless one-click checkout for almost any payment method, including ACH, wire, checks, cards, even terms. It's used by leaders in B2B e-commerce, and it's as easy as clicking to buy a shirt on Amazon. Check them out at getbalance.com. Book a session, tell them what your needs are. They are the first dedicated payment platform for B2B e-commerce, 100% tailored to your needs. Thank you to our sponsors, both PunchOut2Go and Balance. And back to you, Isaiah.
Yeah, I'm excited to bring on our guest, Joseph Kovacs. I think you joked around already that you're not the Olympic shotlifter that was recently on TV. But you do have experience in B2B.
Yes, yeah. He's not my alter ego, though. Hey, all the best. He won silver, so he's representing the name well.
Exactly.
So tell us a little bit about your business, Brand Gaurde. You know, how you got into it. I think for people that kind of look you up, you have this Amazon focus, but as you mentioned to us, it's really a lot broader than Amazon, and it's about protecting the brands and their ability to sell their products, and really B2B and just in e-commerce and commerce in general has become kind of this wild west in a lot of ways, and that's why a lot of brands have, I think, struggled to manage that, right? Which is why they might hire you, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, at Brand Gaurde, we're focused on helping companies, manufacturers, brand owners tackle the tough issue when they realize they've got unauthorized third-party sellers on various marketplaces. Amazon has been a big focus, but increasingly Walmart, eBay has been around a long time. Those types of things are where they tend to pop up, but again, it then can impact a variety of other channels. So a lot of times people are seeing issues with managing their pricing across various channels and having price discrepancies there, and now the retailers are complaining. So you get those types of situations happening, and then we go in and help them. One, we've partnered with legal counsel to help them generate a legal game plan to fight the issue, and then we've built some monitoring solutions through our software Seller Insight, and then we have a service component when we're actually helping investigate and actually manage the enforcement of those, because a lot of times that's the challenge. You get a piece of software, but then you actually have to have the team to run it and complete the process. So instead of just handing people a kind of DIY and hope it works, we walk them through each step of the process and implement a plan to tackle those types of issues. But originally my background was I got into the e-commerce world just kind of dabbling as a reseller on Amazon, and I was a full-time teacher at the time, and like most teachers not making enough money. And so, we just started exploring this and started reselling products, finding on shelves, and, then kind of moved into trying to buy wholesale and resell online, and just kind of opened us up to this world, and realizing, wow, Amazon's this huge channel. And after a while, realizing brands don't like what I'm doing, and we'd have people reach out to us to try to stop selling their products. And I may have only been selling a few units here or there, but it just became increasingly obvious that I'm lining up on the wrong side of this thing. How do I help these companies instead of trying to hide from them? And, there's all kinds of nefarious activity that could go into some of that reselling world, where people are pretending to be one thing and then doing another thing to get access to your products. And I just didn't, I didn't want to do business that way. And so we started down this road of seeing how can we help companies. And there was really no roadmap for that. There were some things that lawyers were putting out about how to tackle this issue, but there was no cohesive strategy, and anything just costs, tons of money, if you're paying hourly to lawyers to do something. And so it forced us to say, how do we help companies, and how do we put together a game plan that, one, works, and two, is affordable. So that's what brought us down that road. Over time, and the last 4 or 5 years, we've been putting that together and been really successful in a variety of industries, all different size companies. We've worked with some Fortune 500 companies, all the way to small, medium size, businesses, manufacturers. So
let me interject and ask
please do.
A couple detailed questions in there. So I've worked with a lot of companies in fashion and beauty and health and wellness and CPG. They've all had, issues to an extent. So I'll give you for example. So one company I've worked with, they sold a lot of women's fashion accessories, belts, handbags, wallets, those sorts of things. People would, buy on a markdown, and they would sell, at a slightly higher price, and, all kinds of reseller craziness. So let's say they came to you and wanted to be a client. How does the process work? Like, what do you do, like, in your discovery, and how do you help them?
Yeah, absolutely. So we first, take some time to understand their business. So we jump on a discovery call. We want to understand, what does their distribution systems look like? How would resellers be getting a hold of their products? We try to understand from a strategic standpoint, what types of go-to-market strategies are they already utilizing, and where are the potential holes there? And then, from our actual process, if this is really a path they want to go down to start controlling their distribution better, it's going to involve, step one, let's put in place a legal foundation for enforcement. And we can go into this in more depth, I think, a little bit later, but it's not inherently wrong reselling legitimate and authentic products.
That's where I was
right?
going to go, because I want to make sure we get there for our listeners. It's not inherently wrong. So right. That's exactly where I was going with this.
So counterfeit products are, obviously, that's always illegal, but just purely resale is also referred to as gray market, because it can be a pretty gray area. And so, from our perspective, a lot of these resellers are dependent on what's called the first sale doctrine, part of copyright trademark law, that says, essentially, if I buy the product legitimately, I can resell it essentially where I want to, and it's not copyright or trademark infringement. Problem is, a lot of that law was written before e-commerce existed, before marketplaces existed, and so what happens is, I think in the rub that a lot of manufacturers feel is, now you've got all these people coordinating in one place, like a marketplace like Amazon, and now they're competing on price, essentially, is one of the main factors. So it causes all sorts of issues, and it's not just they've got their hands on legitimate product, they could get their hands on used product, they could get their hands on liquidated product, they could get their hands on potentially counterfeit product, and now they're reselling against your new listings and and representing your brand. And we see a lot of issues around customer experience. So because of that, there've been court cases over the last 10 or 15 years that have begun to start to basically create exceptions to the first sale doctrine. So one of the main ones would be material difference. So if you can show that there's either something physically different with the product, the packaging, or there's non-physical differences, that could be access to your consumer warranties or product satisfaction guarantees. That could be the quality control standards around distribution, warehousing, shipping. It could be the ability to recall products. So there's close to 50, 60 different non-physical material differences that could exist. And in those court cases, they've established that you actually only have to have one difference to have a case. So the bar is quite low for showing these differences. And if you can show that there is a difference, courts have upheld that product is considered non-genuine, even if it is the legitimate product, if it doesn't come with all the services, benefits, warranties, guarantees, etc. So that's a pathway that manufacturers have been able to use in the US to actually bring successful court cases. One I'm thinking of in the last 18 months was OtterBox versus a third-party Amazon seller, where OtterBox made the case based on these material differences, accessibility or applicability of their warranties, and actually won that court case. And a $60,000 judgment got this account permanently shut down. So there's been other cases. I'm thinking UPPAbaby strollers, high-end stroller brand sued. What was it? They sued Sam's Club, and Sam's Club was buying their product out of a distributor, an unauthorized distributor in Canada, and coming back and selling them in their stores in the US. They couldn't offer the warranties, so they made up their own warranty, type program for these strollers. It was a mess. So this isn't just random third-party sellers. Sometimes it can be big retailers.
Yeah, it's funny because you talked about one that's some tiny guy you probably never heard of, and then one's Walmart, or essentially one of the biggest companies in the world. I think Sam's Club's owned by Walmart.
Right.
So,
yeah. Right.
Just kind of curious, honestly, what are some, and you kind of just touched on them, but are there any kind of like crazy stories just that you've seen that are just happening out there, illegal people doing some illegal stuff on Amazon, or just things that, people might want to be aware of that's even happening that you've seen with one of your customers and you're like, wow, this is crazy that this even exists?
Yeah, I mean, we come across interesting stuff all the time. We see like a big thing right now, and actually, there was just an article being kind of posted around LinkedIn, which was the amount of theft happening in stores like CVS and Walgreens and major retailers, and then that stolen product winds up on Amazon via a third-party seller, like to the tune of billions of dollars worth of stolen goods. Yes.
It kind of makes sense, because I always thought, what do they do with this, these little products, right? How do they even liquidate that?
Yeah. Well, it's not, so that's where companies can be like, how are they able to even sell my product? There's not enough margin through distribution and not enough margin, for there to be any profit. But the reality is you never know how they got it. So there's a really great margin on $0 paid. So, we've actually been able to help one of our large companies in the tech product space. They were suffering from stolen products coming out of Best Buy Canada, and a theft ring happening there, and then the products winding back on an Amazon US. And so we've been able to help them identify those resellers and pursue legal action, and actually won a couple $1 million judgments against these theft rings. So that's one situation that's kind of wild.
Crazy. Tell me about just sorry, there's a lot of questions. That $1 million judgment. I mean, what does that even mean? I mean, can these guys even pay it back, or it just kind of bankrupts them? Like, what happens to these? I imagine these guys don't have millions of dollars just sitting in a bank account, or maybe they do because they've stolen so many goods.
I don't imagine they have stacks of cash laying around, but it can do things like shut down their seller accounts, seize the money that's in those seller accounts that maybe is still tied to like when you sell on Amazon, you may have, depending on how much you're selling, Amazon holds a portion of that and pays it out, in every couple weeks. And so you may have $50,000 waiting to be paid out to you or something like. So you could seize all that money, I guess potentially seizing bank accounts and things like that. So I don't know exactly. I imagine, to your point, they're probably not getting paid $1 million back to that judgment, but seizing whatever assets they can and certainly bankrupts the thief. So
well, I would bet also that insurance is playing a role in these payouts, from the judgments, because on Amazon they're requiring people to carry insurance policies of various sorts. So if you're a seller, so I'm sure that somebody is figuring out who's getting paid and how they're getting paid out.
That's relatively new. It's kind of been there, I think, in the terms of service writing, but a lot of times, at least I know, smaller sellers weren't carrying any type of liability insurance or anything like that. So it seems like there's been a bigger push for that type of thing. As Amazon has been now starting to be held liable, they're like, we're going to make sure there's.
Well, I actually know of someone who ended up getting a $10 million liability policy to sell on Amazon. And,
wow.
I'm not sure exactly how they got that level, but that was sort of where they ended up based on their sales and all that kind of stuff. So it's interesting that that's really what's happening now. And Amazon's probably selling the policies and getting some good money off
that. They're finding a way. they're always got their hands in a piece of the pie somewhere.
Probably so.
But we've seen.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, it sounds like the lawyers are the ones making out with all this.
They certainly find a way to get paid. And I think that's part of my role too. Our company is to say, hey, we're not lawyers. There's a place for them, and there's a place to work with good ones. But how do we minimize some of those legal expenses? So it's not just, you're working hourly for, who knows how long and how effective. So, we wanted to kind of give a different perspective on that, to say, how can we help them manage some of those legal costs in associated, because there are parts of this that you do need legal help with. But we don't need a lawyer to do investigations. We don't need to be paying a paralegal $150 an hour, for certain parts of this thing. So, I kind of see ourselves as like a middleman integrator with a few different processes and pieces of the equation to help make it seamless and cohesive. So, but kind of going back to your interesting stories, we've seen where like a wholesale manager was doing backdoor deals with resellers.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
out the back door, unbeknownst to the company. And once we started uncovering some of that, there was let's just say an organizational shakeup.
I was gonna say, I'm assuming he's no longer working there.
It can get messy sometimes.
I started.
You've seen all sorts of stuff.
Oh yeah, I mean, what I think is funny too is that this is really just continuing the practices of like all these retail rings that used to be around years ago. And you mentioned like, people stealing off the shelf of like a CVS or whatever. But, you know, I used to
Right.
be a retail boss, and people would park like their cars, you know, out back and throw stuff in the trunk and race off at high speed. And then they'd go to another parking lot and sell all the goods, you know, so, or start their ring of different things that were going on. And I can't tell you how many of those investigations I got involved in. It was pretty extraordinary. So really it's just kind of duplicated and got much bigger, you know, now that it's you know,
And now
e-commerce.
it's more complex because you have these marketplaces and people can have these anonymous digital identities, right? Like it's probably hard to track down who really is this guy that's,
Right.
you know, Amazon seller XYZ, it's, you know. Just to help our listeners, you know, the whole goal of our podcast is really to educate mainly manufacturers and distributors and wholesalers, the kind of the key B2B sellers, to get more sophisticated with B2B e-commerce. So I have a couple of questions around that. One is, who do you think should be paying attention to this? And let's say going out and saying, we need to hire Joe and Joseph's team. Like, is it the CEO? Is it the chief marketing officer? Is it the VP of sales? Like, just so an organization can even think about this the right way, like who should be leading this charge? Because that's probably part of the problem. They're like, who even takes ownership over this?
Who owns this in the organization? Yeah, I find it often depends on the size of the organization. You know, small to medium size, you're typically dealing with a C-suite level person, could be a VP of marketing, VP of sales. You know, smaller companies, it could be the CEO if they're really invested. You know, a lot of times founders are going to feel particularly invested in that type of situation where they feel like their brand is being devalued. But, you know, as the organization grows, honestly, a lot of times the e-commerce manager or somebody tasked with overseeing marketplaces is the first one to see the issue or closest to the issue. And so they'll commonly reach out because they're feeling all the pain associated with that. And so, you know, then it also involves on some level those kind of C-suite type people that they report to as well. Because and then also larger organizations that have legal teams, typically those people get involved. They're not the ones running the show, but they've definitely got the veto power to make sure, hey, is this all happening above board and, you know, making sense. So, you know, it does touch on several different circles within the organization: e-commerce, sales, legal, kind of all have a
Operation.
part. Yeah, right. Are all kind of tied in there. Distribution, man, you know, who's kind of overseeing distribution partners. It can touch on there too.
So I want to ask another question to help our listeners because, you know, it seems like you guys focus on manufacturers, which makes sense, right? They're trying to protect their brand. You know, I noticed you guys had Theragun on your website, which is awesome. I love that. Love the Theragun brand. I got it for my brother for Christmas a couple of years ago. That makes total sense, right? Like they're protecting their brand. It's unique. They don't want the product being sold for 50% off on Amazon. You know, Apple's probably the best at this, right? It's like impossible to get an Apple discount.
Right.
But how can distributors maybe partner with the manufacturers in a smarter way and be an advocate? Like, it seems like this is kind of this interesting way that like distributors could be like a better partner to the manufacturers, help them and say, hey, we're selling for you on Amazon and all these guys are screwing it up and they're, you know, we can't get any sales because they're you know, selling it for too cheap. Like, how does that, where do you see that playing in?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple different levels there, which for a lot of traditional companies where they're just used to filling a PO and sending it out in bulk, right? Like they don't want to handle direct to consumer channels. Like they will often have authorized selling partners online. So where they give them specific authorization to sell on a channel like Amazon or Walmart or so, I think there's the reseller group where they're saying we are giving you authority to essentially retail online, and then there are, like, I guess, purely distributors that are selling to small to medium retail operations where they are selling to resellers, and those big distributors that are selling to resellers, it's almost a negative incentive in some ways to police it, because they make money when they sell product, just like Amazon does. So Amazon's kind of like, I don't care who's selling it as long as the product's legitimate, and we make a cut. And so a lot of big distributors kind of have some of that same perspective, like, we don't want to get into the hassle of managing or policing your distribution. So I think it's tricky there, but I am seeing, as this issue is popping up more and more, larger distributors are kind of learning how to play nicely, and work with companies. So I'm thinking of one really large distributor in the health and wellness category, that has some specific programs built around minimum advertised pricing management and cutting off sellers that are breaking MAP policies, or they have some programs now where you can cut, you could essentially say, hey, we don't want to sell to e-commerce sellers, specifically, if that's all their business is e-com sellers. We don't want, because they're going to most likely to cause the most amount of channel conflict. So now that particular company will charge essentially an estimate of what they will sell to those types of companies, so that you're still paying for them to play the game the way you want them to play it as a brand owner and manufacturer. So they're finding a way to still monetize some of that as they work. But for some companies, that makes sense to say this isn't going to be an ongoing headache and source of sellers that create channel conflict. It's worth it. I'll pay to do some of that. So anything you can do. I think, again, distributors they've been historically pretty good about saying, hey, we'll post your MAP policy and we'll try to instruct sellers to abide by MAP. But now they are starting to do a little better, for instance, to say, if you can supply us with a do not sell list of specific sellers and their contact information, and we'll cut off accounts that are creating channel conflict or really hurting the brand. So there are some distributors that are doing that type of thing now, and I think becoming some better partners over time.
It sounds like MAP pricing just isn't enough anymore, right? Like the old, hey, this is our MAP pricing. It's too much. There's so many channels, and Tim, kind of getting to the main thing I want to talk about is just channel conflict in general.
Sure. Well, let me bring up a channel, since Isaiah's bringing us up. As I said at the head, I've worked with a lot of people in health and wellness, fashion, beauty. A lot of people have affiliate marketing programs, right? And it's a channel, right? Your affiliate channel is a big deal, but that can also be like a giant headache, because all of a sudden you're losing control over things in a very particular way. And then thousands of units of items are floating around through these particular affiliates who are doing well. And then affiliates are often also influencers, right? Today, they're influencers, doing their own thing out in social, and it becomes this extra thing going on. Oh, I see that we had a special guest pop in, and then I see that Joe popped off.
Yeah, if you're on audio, you're not gonna appreciate it, but we got a special guest today.
We're always happy to have special guests on the podcast. It's not a problem, Joe.
Well, I appreciate your willingness to accommodate. So I've got quite a few special guests floating around. So,
we are A-okay with that, unless like an eagle is flying down and poking your eyes or something,
I think most of our audience is audio, but we're trying to we're trying to grow that YouTube channel. So one of these days, people will start to see our faces. I don't think YouTube is like a whole different ball game than audio.
Right.
But I guess just to zero back in, I was bringing up affiliate and social channels in particular as pain points potentially for folks that I've worked with in over the recent years. So let's begin there and see what you think.
Yeah, so I think the affiliate channels are always interesting because you never quite know who's representing you or who's making a post about you. Again, maybe they do love your products legitimately, or that's kind of, I'm thinking more of the influencer type people that exist now. But I guess what will be some examples of affiliates that you've seen and dealt with, Tim?
Well, I'll give you an example. So I've been involved with a lot of vitamin supplement, brands, many,
Right.
and almost all of them have very successful affiliate programs. And they could be, for example, I'll just give this because it's older data, so I don't think they're going to yell at me. But I was at Nature's Bounty, Puritan. They at the time they owned Vitamins World. They had a Vitamin World. They also had Doctor's Trust. All these brands. Each one of those brands had an affiliate program with thousands of sellers who were getting special, links, let's say, to distribute on in their content and their sites, whatever they were up to, in order to, get discounts for the products that were coming through their ads or their content, right? So those people, were also getting like bumps. They were getting various, dollar amounts for selling over certain levels, right? So they're getting paid multiple ways by the brand, but they could also abuse that, right? There could be people who were really like gaming the system in order to get those extra bumps of hundreds or thousands of dollars in cash for hitting these thresholds. But we had to research that. We had to figure that out. We had to understand what was happening. But it was by the thousands. We had all of these sorts of things going on. It was a lot to manage.
And I think that's some of those situations where, for instance, if you had another way to make money on product, you actually don't have to make any money on the sales of those products, right? Like, so potentially you could have an affiliate who has some kind of arrangement where people buy through his affiliate link and then, is essentially just selling those products at break even. And now they're making money, and, maybe they made a little bit of money because they got a discount, and then maybe they made a little bit of money because of affiliate. So, I mean, there's some of those. Obviously, anytime you start adding distribution channels, it starts increasing complexity. And people want to be omni-channel, right? Like we want to have all these sorts of streams of income. And you just got to be wise about that. I think one of the things that we're able to help companies do is, and I think really excel in, is that investigation piece. So around the anonymous seller, most sellers are not going to be anonymous. Some channels are harder than others, but historically Amazon's been one of those where it's like a black box around who these sellers were. And we put together a database now of close to 500,000 Amazon sellers, 50,000 Walmart sellers now, and
sounds like a product
there's different
right there. I think that's a product in the making right there, a little SaaS product.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. So we actually put together essentially a reverse lookup tool around, like if you had, for instance, our use case we were thinking was if you had somebody that wanted a wholesale account to be able to take their information they're providing you and cross-check it with like known e-commerce sellers to say, is this an Amazon seller fronting as somebody different, or they're just not being honest about having an Amazon sales channel. We've played around with some of that, but we're actually building that ability inside our main tool, Seller Insight, so that you could just essentially do a reverse lookup if you had some piece of data. As of now, we have the data once the seller show up on your account. We can show that data of who that seller is. But there's other ways of getting that investigations. So we work with our legal counsel doing something called a DMCA subpoena, which is Digital Millennium Copyright Act. So basically, the lawyer subpoenas Amazon because these sellers are selling on your copyrighted images, copyrighted content, and usually Amazon's legal counsel within about 6 to 8 weeks will come back, and we can kind of batch 15, 20 sellers at a time, and get email, phone number, physical address, as an additional way if they're not already in our database or our investigation team is not able to tie them to maybe other information floating around the internet. So it's getting harder and harder for sellers to truly hide and be anonymous. But it's tricky, man. If you're one of those and you've got tons of affiliates selling to, anytime you lose visibility, that's the hard part into who's buying your product. It's going to become a challenge, and you're going to have some of those issues come up.
So you mentioned Sam's Club in one of your examples. So you are doing, one of your channels is also physical retail, like you're checking out how things are happening in physical retail, or is that Sam's Club online?
Yeah, well, that Sam's Club was just an example of a lawsuit that happened. But as of right now, we're mainly policing Walmart and Amazon because those are the big two that are where third-party sellers are proliferating. But we're able to help, and we're actually actively growing in especially like the price management, price monitoring, and a variety of sites. So that's mainly still e-com channels where maybe you have a more direct relationship. So like a Target, you're selling on Target.com or Best Buy, or depending what vertical you're in, where it's more direct relationship. But there's definitely this interrelationship with more and more of these different sites are, and even physical retailers are checking what's happening online. And that's where the channel conflict comes. So Amazon has had the biggest visibility for the longest amount of time. And so, we have people say, oh, well, Target said they're not going to carry our product because the price is too cheap on Amazon. But I mean, you just can say that with any retail partner now, where they're going, hey, do you know what's happening online with your products? Like, we can't compete with those prices, or we see it popping up. And so even more now is price, like automatic price matching. I don't know if you guys have seen that too, yeah. Where it's, like, if you have a direct relationship with Amazon and their B2B sales, as a B2B platform is rapidly growing as well. But, they'll do things like, obviously, if you have a 1P or direct relationship with Amazon where you're selling to them, they'll aggressively match other retailers. And then if you don't have a direct relationship and you're selling as a third-party seller, they actually will shut down what's called the buy box. So that main listing where you're, on the main page where your product is showing up and you can click to buy now, that will go away, and you have to click an additional button, and the conversion rates go way down. But if they're not the lowest offering and some other retailer is a lower offering, they'll automatically shut these listings down. It's kind of crazy, their aggressive pricing tactics. But it just influences so many things.
So I want to get back into the greater channel conflict conversation around, like, I think you said something that I agree with. I think everyone wants to be omni-channel, and I think to a decent extent, it makes sense to be somewhat omni-channel, right? I mean, I think it's very difficult, but not impossible, to be 100% direct to consumer or 100% direct to your main customer groups on your website, right? Like, it's just very difficult to build that massive, global brand recommendation that people are going to go straight to your website, right? Especially for small or even mid-sized brand. So chances are you're going to sell to some retailers, you're going to sell some distributors, marketplaces, whatever. But as you said, it also gets more complex as you do too much of that. So like, I know this is a very hard answer because it kind of depends, right? Depends on the customer. But what advice do you have for people going omni-channel, and how should they approach it? Should they think about it as buckets? Like, I have my marketplace buckets, I have my retail buckets, I have my distribution bucket. Like, how would you kind of organize the approach so that you can minimize some of these problems? I mean, it's impossible to eliminate, but.
So I think, some of the ways that I think about it is in terms of control, and so the more, obviously direct to consumer, you have more control. You add in a marketplace, you're going to have a little bit less control, but you can do it in a way where maybe you're selling directly on the marketplace to consumers. Now it has its own challenges, and you need to have specialties and skills involved with that. But you have more control over that. Well, now if you sell directly to Amazon, you're giving up a lot of that control, but they handle lots of pieces of the equation. So I think there's always kind of a handoff between ease of access and control. And so the more ease of access you have by having different retailers and them opening up to their groups of customers, you're going to lose control there. But anything you can do to minimize, I would say, that visibility on the second layer. So if you don't have to use a massive distributor to get into a bunch of retail stores, like, there's going to be headaches. It could bring a lot of great sales. So you have to, view the risk reward profile there. But just think about it in those terms. Okay, what do we have control? What do we have capabilities around? Can we handle this in-house? Do we need to outsource? What's the ease of getting into some of those channels? But I think it starts with a cohesive resale strategy. So I would break it down into these buckets, and I don't mean to go into too much of a tangent here, but you've got basically everybody's concern. If you have a lot of different channels, you want them basically to be consistent in pricing, right? Like, that's kind of like the main line issue. Can we have consistent pricing around somebody goes on Amazon, if somebody goes into Walmart, if somebody goes onto some other retailer site, that they want to have a consistent experience, positive, value and branding, content, all of that. So, when you're thinking about how do I have consistent pricing, your authorized sellers, the ones you have a relationship with, they're the ones that are, your authorized retailers, they're the ones that are going to be most likely to abide by your guidelines there. So have guidelines, have pricing guidelines. That's not, it may be hard to police in the beginning, but still put them together. The biggest challenge for most people in policing their pricing guidelines is those unauthorized, unknown resellers, right? And so they try to tackle those issues of not pricing against the unauthorized sellers. Well, that doesn't really work that well because you can't cut off access. So it's having a cohesive strategy about, this is how we're going to market. This is how we're going to, the types of channel partners we want to have. Understanding who your authorized retailers will be, and then having a game plan to deal with the unauthorized guys. Because if you can deal successfully with them, it's a lot easier to manage all the authorized retailers. And I think that's a lot of times the biggest breakdown is when they start having all these authorized retail partners and they are omni-channel, and then you throw into the mix all these kind of small resellers that are creating pricing discrepancies. Well, then your authorized guys go chasing those sellers, and it creates a lot of headaches.
Like you said, probably not, right? Like the distributor, they're just trying to make money, and they might have, 100 manufacturers or whatever that they sell. They don't have time to police, the products of one of their manufacturers. Like it's just, it would be impossible for them to do that. So that downstream effect of people, buying liquidated or, clearance products, that I know people that even do this, they'll go and buy stuff at like Costco and then sell it on Amazon, right? Like there's like little discrepancies. There's still, you can make money on it, not a lot, but
there's margin here, margin there. So yeah, cohesive strategy. Have a plan for your authorized sellers around map pricing. Have a plan for the unauthorized sellers around, resale policy, material difference, et cetera, and a game plan to go after them consistently. And I think consistency is the hardest thing to achieve in enforcing your selling policies. And so having a way to consistently enforce those, we see over time that brands tend to have less and less problems over time as they consistently enforce. Am I coming through okay? I'm kind of getting some internet.
You sound great.
Yeah, you sound great. Cool. There's a little bit of choppiness, unfortunately. It happens from time to time, but no, yeah, you're good. You're good. So it makes sense. So basically your suggestion is bucket out these different people, different types of, resellers, have consistency, enforce these policies, and then come up with a plan to enforce whatever you can against the unauthorized resellers. Do you think that they should, brands should kind of go into it assuming, like getting ahead of it, like, hey, look, we don't have an unauthorized plan, crackdown plan. Let's start doing that now before it becomes a bigger issue.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything you can do to be preventative is going to be helpful. That way you're not, you're not tackling the problem once it becomes a big mess, but you set up these structures, you set up the expectations ahead of time, so that you're going to have less problems if you're making if you already have that enforcement game plan set up ahead of time. And so anytime, we've encouraged people, you don't have the problem today, but set up your resale policy, set up your those enforcement strategies so that when you have 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 pop up, now you can tackle the issue there rather than it just starts to grow and now you're dealing with, we have companies coming to us with hundreds of resellers. It's like trying to put the cats back in the bag. It's a lot harder, when you have a few hundred. And so being wise, like we see people making decisions in a silo, like, oh, we've got a product that's into season. Let's just liquidate it all, and it's like, I get that, why that, but you're not thinking about second and third order consequences around, that's going to go to TJ Maxx. That's going to go to some of these second layer. And then you might have people buying up all that liquidated product and reselling it as brand new, competing with you in marketplaces. So, or you're running crazy discounts that then, we've seen, I can tell you a large, well-known brand in the tech space offered a really crazy discount on one of their new phones. And we work with another team that works with them, and they said we were able to track that of that promotion, like 90% of those purchases went to basically 2 large resellers. So these resellers were buying all of the, all of the discounted product running on a special promotion, and then they turned around and sold it on the same listings. Wow. At full price,
So the whole idea is, hey, we want to get our product out there. Let's give a great discount. And at the end of the day, they basically just sold it to the same distributors and retail.
I'll give you an alternative view on that, though. So another one of my clients, they have, like everybody, there are supply chain issues and, warehousing issues and all these sorts of things. So one of the reasons folks liquidate is that they need to make room for new goods to come in, and it's more advantageous for them to get them to a low price and to move them along. So, to those folks, they just want it out. and they don't necessarily care that somebody else is going to sell it for a higher dollar value later down the road.
Sure. I mean, I totally get why it's necessary in some cases, but it's being thoughtful of how that's going on, and just understanding that the conflict that some of those decisions can create. And again, risk reward, it's, if we're gonna, how big is an e-commerce channel like Amazon to you? How much problem does that potentially create? If it seems like that's going to be small, you're not liquidating a huge amount of inventory. You're making you say, hey, I'm making this calculated decision. It's better for us to liquidate. And I think just trying to work with some better liquidation partners potentially,
that's a great tip. I mean, that's sort of where I've ended up advising people. It's not that you shouldn't liquidate, it's that you should actually know where your product goes and exactly have control of that as it goes out into the world, because there is a brand effect.
Yeah, let's get into that, because I think we're getting to something that companies don't think enough about. And it seems like this is a huge opportunity for brands to take advantage of this. Let's say they need to liquidate, $100,000 of product to make room a new product, whatever. I'm just making up that example. I think the ideal scenario is one, selfishly build some brand equity in your own website and have some D2C capabilities, because you could start by saying, hey, look, let's throw it up on our website and do a big clearance sale on our website. And if you can make that successful, then you drive a ton of brand traffic to your own website. You know exactly who's buying from you, because they fill out, most likely information. Hopefully it's mostly direct to consumers and not retailers buying on your website. But that's one. And let's say that doesn't work. But to your point, Tim and Joe, like you find the right partner. Let's say you can't get enough of it sold on clearance on your website. Maybe there's a slightly downstream strategy on Amazon, or it's that control, right? Like, how can you kind of do it in a way that's semi-controlled, even if you can't do it entirely on your website, right? I think that's kind of the key here. I think we lost you, Joe. You still there?
Did we lose you?
It's a little jumpy right now, so I apologize. I'm not in my normal setup today. So,
are you on your private island? Is that where you are?
Try turning off your video, because video is usually the thing that kills it. It might help if we all do that, actually. See if that works.
Does that work?
I'm back now. So
yeah,
it is wonderful to have you back
for a second. I think that that'll help.
Yeah, we'll roll with just my picture up there.
You look great. You look great.
So yeah, do you get where I'm going with that? Like, ideally, you just clear it all on your website, but obviously not everyone has the ability to liquidate, $100,000 in a day on their website or whatever. So what would you kind of advise, let's say they maybe do a partial strategy of that plus something else, or maybe they, like you said, they sell themselves on Amazon. That might seem like a decent strategy, right? Because they can at least control the account themselves.
Yeah, I think those are definitely options. And I see some people doing it successfully by having, let's just say, generation 1 and then generation 2 products, right? So now you can say, well, look, we don't really care what's happening with the generation 1 products, but your listings are clearly delineating this is a different product for some reason, or maybe you update your packaging to have a new listing when you do roll out the new product. Obviously, that gets a little more challenging when you're dealing with something like expiration dates, where it's not really that the product has changed and you're liquidating it; it just is older. For those types of companies, you just got to be careful, because, in my early days of reselling, I was buying liquidated product on eBay, and reselling it on Amazon is brand new, because to me, I'm kind of early in my days as a reseller. It's in brand new packaging. It looks perfectly fine. Now, I don't know, I'm not going to open it up to see the quality of, this beauty cream, for instance. But you could get reseller, or, you could get consumers getting that old product. And now you run into negative reviews and things like that. So, I guess that's where it's like, depending on what you're selling and why you're liquidating it. If it's close to expiration, for instance, like, hey, that's something, I don't know, what's the potential brand hit if you just basically destroyed that inventory versus letting it leak out into a secondary market?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, I think you're bringing up some great points. I think there's a big difference between selling, something that's fairly evergreen, right? Like, there's some products where, if it's 2 years old, it probably doesn't matter that much. If it's some sort of hard good that's not electronic, even electronic kind of deteriorates, right? Because they have this kind of shelf life and obsolete date, with most electronics. Right. But there are kind of these hard goods, like, let's say furniture probably isn't going to deteriorate if it's in great shape, right? Like that kind of thing. But you make a great point where things like beauty or health or, obviously food is like the most extreme.
Right.
But there's these in between, like I never really, I don't really buy a ton of beauty products, as you could probably tell. So I'm not really thinking about like the date of my beauty products all that much, but I could see how that has a big impact for some people. Makes a lot of sense that, getting a 2-year-old beauty product could actually like almost harm you, right? Might even have a negative effect on your skin or something like that,
Skin reactions, it definitely is real. So yeah, I think it just kind of a big, it depends on what you're selling, and the trade-offs and the potential risk, because the potential risk for that beauty product is a lot higher than a potential risk for, a 2-year-old couch, like you're mentioning. So, I think you just gotta, there's no gonna be one size fits all answer across the board, outside of trying to have as much visibility into, who are those liquidation partners. Once it hits them, what do they tend to do with it? Like I can just think of, like, we've got a ring of stores in our area discount stores that buy a lot of Target liquidation. But again, that's going to be onesie twosies type thing. And I'm not too concerned about those. It's the people that buy the, pallets of liquidation product, and now they've got tons of access. Those are the people I would be more concerned with. And so just trying to have some insight into, once it hits your liquidation partner, what do they typically do with it? Any insight you can have there, and just that trade-off of maybe it might be wise to like destroy this bit if it's going to potentially harm consumers or wind up causing a lot of negative brand equity if it's sold in the wrong places.
Well, I love your take. I think I have the answer. How about they just hire you? That sounds like a good.
I think that's a great suggestion, Isaiah. That we're just going to direct everyone to Joe Kovacs and do, and that's it. We're going to have them hired.
Yeah,
and we've run into that specifically. We had a beauty product, a beauty brand that sold in Walgreens, CVS, and they decided to move direct to consumer through their website and Amazon. And when they did, Walgreens, CVS liquidated all that inventory. And then now they had 60 sellers competing with them on Amazon because it had trickled down from that liquidation that Walgreens and CVS did into their direct to consumer channel that they were trying to emphasize. So, within a few months, we got that cleaned up from 60 to under 5, and those guys weren't competing with the brand. So it's when you just see enough of those, you're like, there wasn't much they could do about that. But we were able to make it a non-factor, and they were able to continue on with their direct consumer strategies that they wanted to. So, I don't say that we're the answer for everybody, but we've definitely been able to help a lot of brands.
Cool. Well, yeah, no, this was awesome. I think it's a different lens into B2B e-commerce than I think most people might get on our podcasts that are sometimes a little more focused on just the kind of the nuts and bolts of operations. But
right,
it's super important, right? There's just so many things to think about, and I definitely learned a lot. I'm gonna probably take some of this knowledge to some of my conversations with future customers.
Yeah, and this is really a big help. I mean, it's exactly the kind of thing that our listeners, are really appreciative of. Just hearing things they may not be completely aware of, and learning more, and hearing from leaders in the business. So Joe, thank you so much. And how do people find you and more about your business again? Because most folks are going to be listening to this, so just put it out there.
So you can definitely reach out through brandgaurde.com. That's BRANDGUARDE.com. We've written a ton of articles. If maybe you're just looking to learn a little more at first, and we're creating more video content in our resources section there. But if you want to set up a free strategy call, we have that ability there. Or we'll just spend 30 minutes talking through some of your issues and seeing what can be done. And I think that's the biggest thing for people is they may be really frustrated. They don't know what to do about some of these situations, and just kind of hashing it out with them in a no risk situation. So that's probably the best place to go. And certainly we can see if there's ways that we can help. So.
Excellent. I mean, Isaiah, was there anything else you wanted to say to wrap up another episode of The Hard Truth About B2B e-commerce?
No, this was awesome. I think, Joe, we'll just need to connect in general. I think we have a lot of synergy between the work that we do, overlaps quite a bit, but I really appreciate it. I think you're going to help a lot of people by getting this knowledge out there. So.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for the opportunity to discuss with you today. And I really appreciate it.
It's a pleasure. Thank you so much.
All right. Y'all have a great day.
You too.